For the first time in what has felt like a while, Purdue just gets ran out of the gym in Mackey Arena, facing a tough Iowa State squad, losing 81-58. Definitely a lot to learn from. The sky isn't falling, but there are definite flaws with this Purdue team, and we're going to talk through everything from the game that you need to know right here on Boilers in the Stands. Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I'm your host, Joe Jackson. Alongside me, as always, is my co-host, Kraig Bowers. Obviously not the result Purdue wanted at a game where they basically just got punched in the mouth. Not right away. It was a back and forth for the first 16 minutes or so. But closing the first half to start the second half, especially, Purdue simply just got punched in the mouth. This is a really good Iowa State team. I don't think that this loss means that Purdue is done for. I think it definitely showed what the flaws were for Purdue, and all of them came through in this one specific game. So lots to learn from, lots to improve. Right. I think I'm just going to jump straight into my big takeaway before throwing it to you, Kraig, is right. This after the Texas Tech game, it was like, oh, this defense can be very good. I think I was very concerned, though, that it was like, yeah, it was good. It was a very good defense performance. Left some guys open. It's still like this team still has to give up something to be successful. Iowa State knocked down a ton of threes. Start the second half, the defense just wasn't there. And then when you accompany that with Purdue missing what's basically every single wide open three they got, it just seemed like they kind of got shell shocked, and then they go down 15-20. At that point, you're just not able to come back. So just kind of a collection of everything that could go wrong in one specific game for Purdue, and an unfortunate time for them to have that happen.
Yeah, and defensively, like in the first half, I felt like they held up for the most part until right towards the end of that first half when Iowa State got a few kind of free looks. But I mean, if you told me that Purdue was going to hold Iowa State was on pace to score 70 points, that Purdue was going to hold Iowa State to 70 points, and they were going to win the turnover battle in this game, I'd say, okay, like Purdue's going to score 78 or 80, and it's going to be an 8 to 10 point win. But it just didn't happen. And I don't know. I'm really interested to hear as we get into some more specific breakdowns, Joe. But, something obviously was different out of halftime. And I don't know if that's breakdowns from Purdue or if that was things specifically that Iowa State was doing offensively that kind of opened the floodgates because, yeah, they were getting into the paint a little bit in the first half. But, man, in the second half, it felt like they were getting into the paint at will, especially in that first 6-7 minute stretch. And then Purdue was in help and help and help. And you just can't play that way all the time and expect to win from the defensive end. So, I mean, for me, that the takeaway was that the breakdowns defensively in the second half, but also like you can't let your offense dictate your defense or impact your defense. And it really felt in this game specifically that their defensive focus and their defensive intensity was directly impacted by the fact that they could not buy a bucket. Because that should also be another really big takeaway here is just like Purdue could not buy a bucket from outside. They couldn't buy a bucket from the free throw line. TK missed some floaters he normally hits. Like it didn't matter. We can talk about the 3-point percentage, but it didn't matter. Anywhere on the court, by and large, this team could not buy a bucket. But you've got to figure out other ways to win, whether that's dominating the glass, whether that's creating turnovers, whatever it is. And today they just couldn't manufacture it. They couldn't do other things to try to still eke out a win tonight.
Yeah, I mean they were good at the rim, 13 and 19. But and even what's that, six misses? I would assume half of those they probably got offensive boards on. They literally just couldn't hit a jumper offensively. And right, I think kind of for me personally, kind of throwing out the final 10 minutes or so, whereas at that point you're just like it was kind of just over. But right, that first 10 minutes of the second half, the closing stretch, I mean, really all the first half, just like I thought Purdue was getting pretty good looks consistently, and it was just like, yeah, they're not falling. And even the first um I think the first 16 or 17 minutes of the first half, like Purdue's defense was solid. Was it elite? No, it's never going to be elite, but I think it was solid. And was sitting next to Isaac Trotter of CBS, and he was just saying like Purdue forced 9 turnovers through the first 17 minutes. And then after that, it was like, I forget the exact number he said. It was like 21 straight possessions that Iowa State didn't turn the ball over and they scored like 38 points on them or something. Basically, once Iowa State was able to handle any sort of the little bit of pressure that Purdue provided. They kind of just got what they wanted at will. Also, right, they're the team that knocked down some threes. Josh Jefferson, he goes 3 of 4 from three. That's somebody that Purdue kind of lives with shooting. Killian Toure hasn't been an awesome shooter. He goes 3 of 5. Nate Heisey knocks down a three. So they get the contributions there. That does not explain away all of Purdue's defensive deficiencies by any means, but I think it was just a poor effort. You get the bad variance, shooting variance, and like when you put those two together for this Purdue team that, like you said, right, the offense is the identity. This is when you just get a game like this, and uh, I right the big three. Braden, I think he played solid. I think some of the turnovers was just because he was literally forced to press at some point in the game. But outside of that, Fletch goes 2 of 8. He has 5 points, 3 assists, 3 turnovers. TKR was 1 of 8 from the floor, 2 of 5 from the free throw line. You're not going to win many games like that when you combine that with 4 of 18 from three. Um, just a game that I think long term you just burn the tape. You understand what improvements you have to make, and you just carry on. Go have a relatively easier schedule, kind of finishing out December. Do have the Auburn game, but 4 games for the rest of December. Kind of got to go 4-0, get back on track, and things will be fine. But yeah, not a fun game, that's for sure.
No, and it had felt like from the jump, honestly, in this game that for whatever reason Purdue was the one that came out tight,
Yeah,
right? Like
very.
in in Mackey, like you just don't expect that when you're playing in this arena in front of this home crowd, where Purdue generally just shoots the living daylights out of the ball. You expect them to look like the looser, freer team. And it was the exact opposite. There were multiple rush shots. One from Clough, two from Lawyer right away. A couple of just simple blown layups at the beginning too. That I don't know. It was a weird thing to watch because usually this team comes out with all the confidence in the world in this building, and it was like there was so much build up to it or whatever that they just looked tight, man. And then that avalanche, right? Like you start missing some threes, and I always go back to when Purdue lost to the 16 seed, right? You start missing, and then it starts getting in your head. Okay, like when are we gonna hit one? When am I gonna hit one? But when is the team gonna hit one? And it just bleeds over and bleeds over. And it not only did they not shoot a good percentage from three, but then they started passing up open looks because it's like we can't buy one, and they're just turning them down at some point.
Yeah, and it compiles, and right, like this is a completely different game. I really do think if Purdue just makes 2 or 3 of those first 5 or 6 attempts where they got really good looks. Like if Lawyer's able to not get that first one to go, maybe he settles in. If TKR gets one of his kind of first looks to go, like maybe he settles in a bit more. Like I do think little things like that added up, and the I don't know if it's a major concern because I do believe in like the team's experience and depth, but just kind of the lack of poise was shocking. Like that's like there is plenty of outcomes, realms like possibilities for outcomes where Purdue loses this game, and it's just because Iowa State plays a bit better, right? Maybe Purdue gets sped up just a touch. None of those really involve Purdue simply looking like a team that hasn't been there before. Like that was what was the most shocking thing to me, and because really, outside of what Murphy and Omer and Clough, I guess Jacobson, like everybody's been in this spot before. Even CJ and Jakari last year, maybe not quite the
Yeah.
magnitude of the national championship game from 2 years ago, but they were still in these spots. The Bama game, the getting routed by Auburn, the Sweet 16 versus Houston. Um, it just looked like they simply weren't ready for this, and I don't even think like Iowa State pressure. I think caused some of it, but that first half especially, it wasn't. I think Purdue had
Yeah.
5 turnovers. It wasn't like Iowa State was just like forcing an insane amount of turnovers. 10 of them in the second half, and like I said, most of those come from just at some point having to try to force and do something. Like it wasn't a game where Iowa State's just turning them over 13 times in the first half, and Purdue looks out of sorts. They got good looks for 20 minutes of the game, and just they
Yeah.
it could not go. And this defense is not built to carry. The defense is built to be good enough to allow the offense to thrive. So I do think we'll see. I'll save the long term thoughts maybe for the end. But do you have anything else for kind of initial takeaways, anything like that from the game?
I do not have any more takeaways. I got a question that could either go here or it could go later, but I'm just going to save it to later. Let's throw some love out to our sponsor for today's show quick before we move on. Purdue graduate and Lafayette resident since 1999, Michelle Rainey has 10 years of full-time experience working with buyers, sellers, and real estate investors in Greater Lafayette and many surrounding areas. If you need to buy, sell, invest, or even relocate, call Michelle to schedule an appointment to see how she can help you accomplish the real estate goals you have. Your home or creating an investment portfolio will likely be the most expensive transactions of your life. Have the experts with Rainey and Company at Keller Williams on your side and let Michelle navigate this process to make it easy. Call or text 765-532-3415. Again, that's Michelle Rainey with Rainey and Company at Keller Williams at 765-532-3415.
All right. So thank you to our sponsor of today's show. Um, I think I kind of want to keep it a little bit high level, maybe talk specifically with some of the offense, some of the defense. Um, as I don't, we'll talk about a little bit of the offense, a little bit of the defense. I do think, right, Purdue for 16, 20 minutes got good looks. Like I said, Iowa State was getting whatever they wanted offensively. And then it kind of flipped in Avalanche. But I thought in that first half, especially Purdue did a good job of um, navigating kind of their offense. I thought Braden was good of handling some of the pressure, getting guys open from three. Defensively, it fell apart when Iowa State just pretty much got into the paint whenever they wanted. They came out to start the second half. They ran what I would call like wedge empty, basically an empty pick and roll where there's nobody in the strong side corner. I think they ran it three straight times, got two threes and a layup. Basically where the defense just was completely out of position. The defense, I thought, with Purdue trying to be more of a high hedge in this game, there was just no backside rim protection, and Iowa State took advantage. And then offensively, I think the one thing that stood out in the first half specifically is Iowa State did a great job of just pushing Purdue out, where Purdue still got to their looks, and Braden, I thought, did a very good job for the most part of handling in that first half, but he was working from 30 feet out or 35 feet instead of that 20 to 25-foot range that they're more accustomed to. Every pass felt like tough. Every kind of pick and roll, Braden really had to draw out the big, and he did a good job of it and finding the guys in the times that he did. But then nobody's able to capitalize, and it just felt like, yeah, like Gabe Kripe says, it did feel like Iowa State was pushing Purdue further out, caused them to catch further away from the basket than they would have liked. Either if turnover numbers weren't super high right away. Yeah, like oops. The turnovers weren't necessarily the issue right away.
Okay, I have no idea what just happened there, but Joe temporarily went away. He is getting back into the studio now.
There
Are
we
we
go.
back, Joe?
Yeah, like I don't even know what it just kicked me randomly. But that's kind of like my overarching for the offense and defense is right. It's a lot of pick and roll. I would have liked to have seen them try to get a little bit more like those middle post ups, or some of the high lows. Like Clough, I think's a good enough passer where he could be the guy passing to TKR down low. That's like the one thing that I would have liked to see Purdue try to push the button with a little bit more is just getting in the middle of the floor with the post up ceiling. I think they started to a little bit late in the game, but that's the one thing other than Purdue just maybe knocking down an open three, would have liked to have seen earlier. Just trying to get TKR more involved that way instead of having him uh, really be. I mean, he posted up a couple times that they're always going to double from the baseline. Really, outside of that, it was just a lot of short rolls. I feel like, and then some offensive boards.
Yeah, and I mean, just tough go around all the way for TKR here. And I thought the double really flustered him. The fact that they were sending two at him all the time, and then he did have one or two matchups one on one against Jefferson, and obviously he draws that quick third foul in the second half. But there were a couple of other times where Jefferson just kind of bothered him one on one. It was just a tough outing in general there for him. I I'm with you on the high low. Like I thought that worked really nice a couple of times. I think there might have been one turnover out of it, and maybe that scared them, and
TKR
they kind
threw
of
it
went away.
once.
Yeah, might have went away from it a little bit too quickly, but um, yeah, I don't know, Joe. Like there wasn't a whole lot that went right today.
Well,
Obviously we can blame a lot of it on just like dudes were missing shots they normally hit, but it can't only be that, right?
absolutely. There are still things to learn from because there's no guarantee, even if Purdue was making shots, they still win this game the way it went. Um,
Right.
right. Like Iowa State averaged, uh, give me like, oh, we're getting there. It's so tough to navigate sometimes when it's a small screen. Iowa State averaged 1.6 points per possession in the second half, and that's without scoring for the final like 3 minutes. It was up to like 1 point. It was they were averaging 2.2 points per possession through the first 8 minutes of the second half, and I think it was 1.7 or 1.8 through the first like 15, 16 minutes. Um, you're not going to win any ball games doing that in general. I don't care unless you're shooting literally lights out, kind of like Iowa State did to start the second half. You're just not going to win games that way, and like we can talk about some of the schematics. Purdue was in a high hedge for most of the second half to start, where they're trying to push the ball handler out. Iowa State, I thought, did a very good job of countering that by simply just beating guys one on one downhill. Right, Jakari, CJ, Meyer, really everybody. Like I just they couldn't hold them, and then there was not as much backside help. It felt like, and if it was like Lawyer or Braden or somebody like that was smaller. And I thought that really posed an issue. I thought Braden was like he was good defensively for the most part. But and even
Yeah.
that like it wasn't like elite, but outside of that, I would say overall there was just nobody to keep the ball in front, and then there wasn't really that backside protection that Purdue needs to have a chance.
So I did write down that question for you specifically, Joe, because we come off that first half. I think we created nine turnovers or seven
Yeah,
turnovers in that
nine.
first half. Nine turnovers in the first half. We hold them to 35. Okay. On pace for 70, right? And then it looked like we intentionally switched to a higher hedge where Clough was really trying to push off out of that pick and roll and or push him out in that pick and roll. And to me, it just felt like we couldn't recover fast enough once they pushed out. And then Iowa State was able to use their speed and athleticism to just blow us up and get in the paint. So, like, was that a mistake in general, just moving to more of that in the second half like they did?
I think if I'll have to rewatch to fully like no, but it felt like right in the first half. I like that they mixed it in. It wasn't just every time. It was like, hey, certain actions will be in a high hedge just to kind of change up rhythm, change up the pace. But then we're gonna play more conservative. Maybe it was just like it's not even like Iowa State shot well from three. They shot 4 of 11 from three in the first half. It's not like that's blistering by any means. I do think it was some of a mistake, and I think Iowa State countered it very well to start. Like the play that they ran. I mean, I can try to draw it on the board. Um, with TJ Otzelberg one row in front of me, but um,
Yeah, I saw that.
we can, if you have
All
anything
right.
for the next
Joe,
second, give me
Joe
a sec to try it.
Yeah. All right. Jackson's going to get out a whiteboard and break down the schematics of Iowa State while their head coach is sitting one row in front of us.
Yeah, maybe the most nervous board we'll ever have in my life. Probably if I had to do one for Painter, I'd be more nervous, but there's nobody there. It's something like
Hold
this.
on. Go big screen.
Yep,
Why am I?
we can still hear you.
Go ahead.
So it's reflection's terrible, but it's basically this. It's this like empty pick and roll look. And what Iowa State did to start was essentially, right. They would cross screen here, and then this guy would come and set the screen. So right where this guy's now coming to set this, and I'll move to the next step. So you have the screen here. This was Clough usually. He was in that high hedge, and then it was something like this. And basically, like I don't remember the exact specifics, but so this was wedge empty, so empty corner pick and roll, meaning there's nobody here. And Purdue, I thought for the most part did a good job of like they would stunt in and then recover, um, for the most part. But here, with there nobody being here, right? This is where like the third time that this happened, I know ball like I think it was CJ tries to kind of cheat over, and just burned him backside. And this was either Fletcher or Brady, and I think every time they kind of positioned themselves so that way one of these two was TKR. We know Clough's here. Like you can already see very clearly, there's literally nobody in the paint right now. I think that happened one time out of this, right, where this I'll write the name up here so we can reference it. So with again Purdue in this high hedge, I think Clough got out a little bit too far, and you saw him split. And basically, once the ball handler gets here, right, all bets are off. You have to send help here. You have to dig in a bit, and that's where a kick can happen. I think they hit one or two threes out of this possession, and so right, the first two times they kind of split, get in the middle, get a layup, get a three. Next time CJ tries to kind of stunt over, and then I think it was Lipsy, just burned him completely, refusing the ball screen, getting downhill, getting into the paints. And that was how Iowa State started the second half. Was I believe running that either three straight times or three out of the four possessions that they went to, and basically that empty corner pick and roll combined with the high hedge that Purdue was going to, there was no backside help. Purdue's guards weren't good enough to be able to keep the ball in front. And then once that happens, as Painter always says, you can't live in help, and that's exactly where Purdue was. So then Iowa State gets off to whatever it was, an 8-0 start or something sort of like that, and Purdue just gets punched in the mouth, and basically from there, right, all bets are kind of off, and Purdue was never able to recover. So I think that high hedge, like if you can have TKR on the backside, you can make it work enough, or if you can have enough ball pressure from your guards, as my camera's just not in focus right now. If you can get enough ball pressure from the guards to kind of keep them out, which I think they did a little bit better job of the first half doing, then you can live with it, right? Because then it is pushing the ball handler back. You're able to then have time to recover, but at the same time, when that doesn't happen, now guards are getting to the paint, and that's when it's Lawyer, when it's Braden, CJ, Jakari, Meyer. Like those guys are the ones that have to like quote unquote protect the rim. And right, that's exactly what a team like Iowa State would want. And drive, kick, drive, layup, whatever that they wanted. Iowa State gets super hot. Iowa State's able to continue from there. So I was surprised that Purdue went to it as much as they did to start the first half with that high hedge. But right, it's one of those things that happened. Iowa State took advantage immediately, and that's how I think the game really got out of hand.
Yeah. Do we want to get into some team stats quick?
Yeah, let's do it. Oh man, I forget how small it is when we do it like this. And that's not even the right one. I'm out of sorts too. Purdue, uh, surprisingly, they do grab one more board than Iowa State, which, again, given the score, you just wouldn't expect. But it is what happened in this one. They win the rebounding battle
Well,
33 to.
Joe, when you miss as many shots as Purdue did, you're going to have an opportunity to get more rebounds. So, but their
That's
offensive
true.
rebound and their offensive rebounding percentage on Ken Palm, it shows now too, was a couple of percentage points higher than Iowa State still. So, not
Yep.
terrible job on the boards by any means.
No, it definitely was not the reason that they lost this game. They have 17 assists compared to Iowa State's 19. And when you account for how many shots that they made, it is impressive how many assists they still got. Purdue, I mean. Other big ones, 15 turnovers for Purdue, 12 for Iowa State, although that number was flipped to start the second half, whereas I believe Purdue had 5 in the first half. Iowa State had 9 in the first half, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
17 points off turnover for Iowa State, 13 for Purdue. The big one, Iowa State shoots 11 of 23 from three. Purdue goes 4 of 18. Um, yeah, is there anything else that stands out from a stats standpoint to you?
I mean, the shooting percentages have to jump out, obviously, but we've already talked about that. But I mean, to me, like, right when we talked about this game in the preview show, we said that Purdue had to limit turnovers, and quite frankly, 3 out of those 15 were like in the last 2 minutes of play. I think when Painter had kind of pulled everybody, and they were just trying to get to whatever they possibly could at that point. And we said that we thought Purdue had to win down low. right? They basically come up even in rebounding +1. To me, I really felt like coming in this game, they needed an advantage, that they needed to be +5, +6, especially offensive rebounding, be plus several, and really dominate second chance points. And Purdue had 13, Iowa State had 7, so maybe you can say they win that. I still felt like they needed to have a more decisive advantage in that regard in this game, and I felt like watching that St. John's game, I really felt like they could. And I don't like TK. I think finishes that first half with 7 rebounds. Clough had 1. And I just really felt we'll get into player breakdown a little bit later. Not that we're going to get real in depth with that because, like we talked before the show, it's just going to feel like we're kind of beating up on everybody a little bit. But I felt like Clough didn't match the physicality right away. Um, he, like I said, finishes that first half with just 1 rebound. Really felt like it took him a while to get there, and maybe never did to the point that he has in some of the other games where we've really seen him get physical and dominate down low. Obviously, he picks up 2 fouls, has to go to the bench at some point in there, which impacts it a little bit. But I think he's got to come out ready to throw the first punch and really assert himself in that regard.
Yeah, and he was able to get there a little bit in the second half, but the game was out of hand by that point already anyways. It was just across the board. Just I felt like it wasn't like Iowa State threw a gigantic punch in the first half, but it felt from the jump, like pretty much across the board outside of really Braden. Braden was the only one immediately that seemed ready to play. Everybody else seemed flustered, seemed sped up, and just not ready for this game at all. So maybe if there's anything else you want to hit on, we can. If not, we can maybe get into the player breakdowns. Um,
I want to ask you a big picture question about college basketball before we go there because I don't want it to be buried at the end of the show.
all right.
We have seen now, if we look at the player era tournament, we look at some of these other easy early season tournaments, or even just like, neutral site matchups. We've seen what feels like more games than ever this year where you have two high quality teams playing and somebody just kind of has an avalanche of a run. I think about Michigan, Gonzaga. Gonzaga then turns right back around and does that to Kentucky last night. Avalanche of a run. And we see this in the NBA all the time, right? Where guys are so skilled. And even within 7-game series in the NBA playoffs, the Pacers might come out and blow somebody out by 30 and then lose by 15 the next night to the exact same team. It feels like we're getting there a little bit more in college where, like, if you come out and you're having a really bad shooting night, that there's enough skill and talent on the top teams with the ability for people to transfer and everything else. And there just feels like there's more skill staying in college. It, I don't know. It feels like to me we see it more and that we're going to continue to see it more where, like, if you're having an off night, no matter how good you are, there's a chance you might get run for 20 plus.
I hadn't thought of that, but I do think that's a very fair kind of thought to have. Of the players are just getting so much more skilled across the board that right. This isn't college basketball from 15 years ago. Like these teams are very, very good at what they do. The players are the offensive strides. We see it in the NBA, but like it's coming to college at a maybe a little less extent. There is a cap to what you can do defensively. Like no matter how hard you try and train and stuff, like it is much easier to improve offensively given the talent, the optimized training, the optimized shot selection. Like it is much easier to improve that side of the ball. And so yeah, in a game like this where it becomes much like the ceiling for every team feels much higher maybe than what it's been. And I mean you look at what the offensive ratings have been across the course of the last handful of years, and I know Ken Palm does a good job tracking this. I think Torvik does as well. Like the offense rating just is rising every single year. Offenses are getting better. They're just right outpacing what the defenses are physically capable of doing. And I think that's a very fair point where you get a game like this, or what Michigan did, or what Gonzaga did. They just blew out Kentucky. Like teams can have it, and if teams don't, you're gonna get much wider margins. I think keeping it big picture, like Right. I feel like I don't I hate the debates, but there's always like the like college fans are always like NBA sucks and NBA fans are like college is terrible. Like whatever. I don't care. Watch whatever basketball you want. It's basketball. But for me, part of what makes a college appealing as somebody who also loves the NBA is like a game like this matters more. And so there can be more scrutiny on it. Now, if this was the NBA and Purdue does this, you're kind of like, hey, what happens? And then you move on, right? Because there's 82 games and it's what one game is essentially 1.5% of the schedule, but a game here, it's what 1 out of 31 regular season games. So it just matters more. And that's where right. If there was a larger sample size, I think you can give less to this, but there isn't, right? There's 31 regular season games, 5 of them are bye games that you don't really find out much anyway. So 26 games, 25 games, we'll call it, that are meaningful and impactful in how you're viewed. And um, keeping it, with the blowouts, those can affect things, how things are looked at. So
Yeah. And
went a little bit off
obviously
topic,
with
but yeah,
obviously in college, we have a single elimination tournament, right? So
yeah,
that makes if we're headed more and more that direction, it makes having a bad shooting night and being able to have these kind of swings from one game to the next, makes it tough, man. When we can't have an off night in the NCAA tournament. You have to
nope,
string together 6 games. And I know you guys have heard me say on this show before, I think the NCAA tournament is the greatest postseason in all of sports. I also think it is the worst at picking the actual best team. But that's a whole nother topic for another discussion.